The waitress's hidden skill shocked the millionaire and saved him from disaster. What he did next surprised everyone. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story. Restart everything. Now. I don't want explanations. I want results. Jacob Crawford's voice sliced through the air like a sharp blade. His eyes were locked on the frozen screens in front of him, jaw clenched, fists pressed against the table. The silence in the room turned into nervous whispers, fingers trembling over keyboards, and a tension that felt heavier than the luxury surrounding them. The Maison Bleu restaurant had been closed for that night only. No customers, no distractions. Jacob wanted to impress the European investors with an elegant dinner, a refined setting, and ambitious growth projections for the next 3 years. This meeting would seal a billion-dollar merger, and the future of Crawford Enterprises depended on it. But at that very moment, nothing was working. The projector had shut off, screens were frozen, the numbers had disappeared, a corrupted file, a backup system that wouldn't respond. An uncomfortable silence filled the room, just before voices erupted like popcorn in a hot pan. "What is happening?" asked a German executive, frowning. "Is this some kind of joke?" replied another, his accent thick with impatience. Jacob stood up, eyes narrowing, his face visibly irritated. "Somebody fix this. Now." His voice cut like a razor. The company's tech team, seated quietly in the corner, scrambled to check cables, restart systems, and pull emergency reports, but nothing worked. The main file wouldn't open. The presentation with profits and investment projections had simply vanished. That's when Grace Sinclair stepped in. She wasn't supposed to be involved. Officially, she was just serving wine and fancy dishes. But when she saw the team's panic, the wrong keystrokes, the confused look on one technician's face, and the open file on a side tab no one had noticed, something inside her clicked. A sudden impulse. She stepped forward as if placing a napkin on the table, and whispered to the technician, "You're trying to open it from the slide panel. It's corrupted. Pull from the local cache. Use HTML view mode. It'll open clean." The young man frowned. He didn't understand. She sighed, bent down as if picking up a tray, and muttered, "Alt-Shift-F12. Then click View as Safe Page. You have 30 seconds. He hesitated, but clicked. And then, the screens blinked. The chart returned, the numbers reappeared, the projector turned back on, and chaos turned into relief. Everyone clapped for the technical miracle. Jacob, who had seen it all, stayed silent for a moment. Then slowly turned toward the corner where Grace now blended in, collecting dishes like nothing had happened. His eyes followed her, trying to figure her out. She felt it. She knew he was watching, but acted like she didn't notice. She kept her perfect posture, light steps, eyes down, just like a fine dining waitress should. But inside, her heart was pounding like a drum. He won't connect the dots, she thought. It was just a tip. No one will notice. But she was wrong. When dinner ended and guests began leaving with handshakes and signed contracts, Jacob stopped near the kitchen. His gaze was sharp, looking for something unusual. "You," he said, voice calm, low. Grace pretended to be surprised, turning with a polite smile. "Sir? That file. That was you." She laughed, a polite, automatic sound. "I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean. I just serve wine." He pressed his lips together, didn't respond, just stared at her for a few more seconds, and then walked away. But that look, that wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Later, in the locker room, while changing out of her white uniform into her old denim jacket, Grace heard her phone vibrate. Unknown number. She answered. "That was reckless," said a firm male voice. "Do you really think you can play around with someone like Jacob Crawford?" "Who is this?" she asked, now serious. "Stay away from him. Don't get involved. You have no idea what you're walking into." Before she could reply, the call ended. Grace stood there, staring at nothing, as an old feeling crept back in. Fear. It wasn't just the CEO who had noticed. Someone else was watching. Someone who didn't want her getting too close, or those contracts getting signed. She took a deep breath, put her phone in her pocket, and stepped out into the cold Chicago night, not knowing that from that moment on, her life would never be the same again. Jacob Crawford wasn't the kind of man who left loose ends. Never had been, and that waitress had just created the biggest loose end of the week. He returned to Maison Bleu the next morning, not to eat, but to investigate. He walked in through the side door, straight into the kitchen, where the smell of sautéed onions and garlic mixed with steam from the pots. The team was moving quickly, focused on preparing lunch. Jacob stopped next to a woman in her 50s, her hair tied in a tight bun, slicing carrots with the precision of a surgeon. "You work with Grace, right?" he asked directly. The woman looked up, surprised. She recognized the man instantly. Everyone in Chicago knew Jacob Crawford. "I do, sir. Why? Did she do something wrong?" "No, I just want to know more about her." The cook hesitated, then gave a short laugh. "Look, I'm not one to talk about others, but Grace is different. Always has been. She's not just a waitress, you know? She used to be something much bigger." Jacob tilted his head. "Bigger how? That I don't really know. She never says, but sometimes she looks at a paper, a number, any account, and solves it instantly. Like she's got a computer in her head." The woman lowered her voice. "And there's something strange. It's like she's hiding a secret she's never told anyone. Sometimes she gets tense, stares at her phone like she's expecting bad news." Jacob nodded and left. But now, curiosity was like a fire burning in his chest. He had to know more. 3 hours later, he was sitting in the Crawford Enterprises office, on the phone with a private investigator. "I want everything on Grace Sinclair. Everything. Past, present, even where she buys bread." "Understood, Mr. Crawford. I'll get back to you in 6 hours." 5 hours and 40 minutes later, the investigator called back. "I found quite a bit, and some parts are strange." Jacob leaned back in his chair. "Go on." "Grace Sinclair isn't a career waitress. Before this, she was a prodigy in logic and data analysis. Worked at 2 major companies, one in San Francisco and another in Boston. She had a reputation as a genius. Solved problems entire teams couldn't. But 3 years ago, there was a scandal." "What kind of scandal?" "Embezzlement. They said she was involved. The case was buried, but she got fired, disappeared, moved to another city, changed her life, became a waitress." Jacob frowned. "Was she convicted?" "No, not even charged." "That's what's odd. There's nothing official, no court record. It's like the case was erased. Someone paid to make it disappear. Or someone set her up. So you don't know the full truth?" "No, sir. There are gaps in the story, a lot of them." Jacob hung up and sat in silence for a while. He looked out the window, staring at the city below. Grace Sinclair was a mystery, and he hated mysteries. He decided he needed to talk to her. In person. The next day, Jacob went back to Maison Bleau. This time, he sat at a quiet table by the window. Grace showed up with her notepad, a polite smile on her face. "Good afternoon. What would you like today? A coffee?" "Black. No sugar. That's all?" "For now." She wrote it down and left. Jacob waited for her to return with the cup. When Grace placed the coffee on the table, he said, "You're good with numbers." Grace paused, looked at him with a neutral expression. "I'm good at serving coffee, Mr. Crawford. I'm not talking about coffee." "Then you're talking to the wrong person." She turned to walk away, but Jacob kept going. "I saw what you did with the system. No one else noticed, but I did." Grace took a deep breath, then smiled. A fake, professional smile. "You must be mistaken. I only serve dishes and wine. If you want dessert, let me know." And she walked away before he could reply. Jacob didn't give up. In the following days, he kept coming back to the restaurant with increasingly ridiculous excuses. He ordered tea, said it was too cold. He ordered water with ice, said it was too hot. He ordered a salad, said he wanted to change the dressing. Grace pretended not to notice anything, wrote everything down, smiled, and disappeared into the kitchen. But inside, she was starting to feel nervous. He wasn't going to give up. On the 5th time Jacob showed up, he got straight to the point. "I need to talk to you. Outside of here." Grace crossed her arms. "About what?" "A proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "A job offer." She laughed, a short, almost ironic laugh. "A job? Mr. Crawford, I already have a job. I'm not talking about serving coffee. I'm talking about using what you really know how to do." Grace felt her stomach tighten. She knew where this was heading, and she didn't want to go. "No, thank you. You didn't even hear what I have to say." "I don't need to hear it. The answer is no." Jacob insisted. "It's just an informal meeting. No pressure. You pick the place." "I said no." "Why?" Grace stopped. She looked him straight in the eyes, and for the first time let her mask fall for a second. "Because I don't want to get involved. In anything. With anyone. I just want to live my life in peace." She turned and walked away. Jacob stayed there, sitting, watching her disappear between the tables. There was fear in her eyes. Real fear. The day ended like always. Grace changed clothes in the locker room, grabbed her bag, and left through the back door. The night was cold, the wind cutting through the skin. She walked to the bus stop, then gave up. She decided to walk home. She needed to think. 20 minutes later, she was standing in front of her building. A simple place, with faded walls and creaky stairs. She went up to the third floor, searched for her key in her bag, and stopped. The door was slightly open. Her heart skipped a beat. Grace slowly pushed the door open. The lights were off. She felt along the wall, found the switch and turned it on, and froze. The apartment was empty. Completely empty. Sofa, table, TV, clothes, books, everything was gone. Only the bare walls and old wooden floor remained. Grace stepped in, her legs shaking. She looked around, trying to understand. Who would do this? Why? That's when she saw it. On the floor, right in the middle of the room, a white envelope. She knelt down, picked it up with trembling hands, and opened it. Inside, there were 3 things. A copy of an old contract. Her name was there, signed in the bottom right corner. A photo. Grace, younger, smiling next to a man in a suit. She recognized the face instantly. Brandon. And a handwritten note, with strong, firm letters. He's back. Grace couldn't breathe. Her legs gave out. She fell to her knees on the floor, clutching the envelope tightly as tears started to run down her face. Brandon. The man who ruined her life. The man who vanished after everything. He was back. Grace didn't sleep that night. She sat on the cold floor of the empty apartment, hugging her knees, staring at that photo until the sun came up. When morning light slipped through the dirty window, she made a decision. She couldn't keep running alone. At 8 in the morning, she stood in front of Crawford Enterprises. Her heart was racing. She never imagined she'd ask Jacob Crawford for help, but she had no choice. The receptionist looked at her with suspicion. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he'll want to see me." "Ma'am, Mr. Crawford doesn't take walk-ins." Grace sighed, too tired to argue. "Just tell him Grace Sinclair is here. If he says he doesn't want to see me, I'll leave." The receptionist rolled her eyes but picked up the phone. 2 minutes later, she hung up, stunned. "You can go up. 22nd floor." Grace stepped into the elevator, trying to steady her hands. When the doors opened, Jacob was already waiting, standing with arms crossed, that sharp look in his eyes like he could read minds. "Changed your mind about the meeting?" "I changed my mind about everything," Grace replied, her voice firm despite the exhaustion. Jacob motioned toward the meeting room. They went in. He closed the door. "What happened?" Grace took a deep breath, and then she told him. Everything. The scandal, the embezzlement she never committed. Brandon, the ex-partner who pulled her into the fraud and disappeared, leaving her to take the blame. The firing, the move to another city, the life in hiding. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said, her voice breaking, "but no one believed me. So I ran, became a waitress. I thought it was over. But yesterday, he came back." Jacob leaned forward. "Who came back?" "Brandon, my ex-partner. He broke into my apartment, took everything, left a message. He wants something, and I don't know what." Jacob stayed quiet for a few seconds, then spoke calm and steady, surprising even himself. "Then I'm going to protect you." Grace blinked, confused. "Why? You don't even know me." "I know enough. You saved my meeting. You're smart, and you don't deserve to be hunted for something you didn't do." She laughed, but there was no joy in it. "You're serious?" "Completely." Jacob stood up. "But there's one condition. You'll work with me, as a temporary strategy consultant, here at the company." Grace's eyes widened. "Consultant? I'm a waitress." "You're a data analyst, and a great one. I need someone like you, and you need protection. It's a fair deal." "And if I say no?" "You won't. Because you know you can't face what's coming on your own." Grace hated to admit it, but he was right. She sighed. "Fine, but one condition from me, total secrecy. No one can know about my past." "Agreed." They shook hands, and Grace Sinclair, the waitress, became a strategy consultant at Crawford Enterprises. The news spread through the company like wildfire. In the hallway, in the elevators, in the break room, everyone was whispering the same thing. The waitress became the boss's consultant? That doesn't make any sense. She must have some kind of special talent. I bet something's going on between them. Grace heard it all, and pretended not to. She sat at the desk Jacob had set up for her, opened the files and dove into the numbers. It was the only place she felt safe, in the middle of spreadsheets, graphs, and projections. Some coworkers openly underestimated her. Others were jealous. But Grace didn't care. She had work to do. 3 days later, during a board meeting, an important client threatened to cancel $1 million contract. The reason? An error in the profit projections. The team panicked. Grace asked to speak, took the documents, studied them for 5 minutes, and said, "The mistake isn't in the projections, it's in the calculation base. You used the wrong quarterly inflation rate. If you adjust it to the correct index and include the contingency margin, profit goes up by 4%. Silence. The CFO checked. She was right. The client signed the contract on the spot. Jacob looked at Grace with a half-smile. She shrugged, as if it was no big deal. But inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. Little by little, Grace earned her place. She solved problems no one else could. She didn't talk much, but when she did, people listened. The company started to respect that quiet woman with sharp eyes. But not everything was calm. 2 weeks later, at a corporate event in the company's main hall, Grace was chatting with a coworker when she felt a presence behind her. She turned around and froze. Brandon. He was there. Perfect gray suit, cold smile, calculating eyes, as if he had never disappeared, as if he hadn't ruined her life. "Grace," he said, in a soft voice that sent chills. "What a surprise to see you here." She tried to speak, but her throat locked up. "I thought you'd given up on this life," he went on, stepping closer. "But I see you're back in the game, working with important people. Risky, isn't it?" Grace felt her blood run cold. "What do you want?" "Just letting you know I'm watching, and that certain things from the past have a way of coming back, especially when they're unresolved." Before she could respond, Jacob appeared at her side. "Is there a problem here?" Brandon smiled, extending his hand. "Not at all. Just saying hello to an old friend. Brandon Hayes. Nice to meet you." Jacob didn't shake his hand, he just looked at him coldly. "Jacob Crawford, and she doesn't look too happy to see you." Brandon laughed. "Ah, Grace has always been shy, but I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again soon. See you, sweetheart." And he walked off, leaving a trail of tension in the air. Jacob looked at Grace. She was pale, shaking. "That was him, wasn't it? Brandon?" She just nodded. "Come with me," Jacob said, gently holding her arm. "You're not alone in this. Got it? I'll help you." Grace looked at him. There was honesty in his eyes, but there was also something else. Something that scared her as much as it comforted her. She was torn between the independence she had fought so hard to keep and the security Jacob offered. Between trusting or running again, between opening her heart or locking all the doors. But before she could decide anything, Jacob's assistant showed up, out of breath. "Mr. Crawford, we have a problem. The investors are in the conference room, and there's a man with them. He says he has important documents about the new consultant." Grace felt the floor drop from under her feet. Jacob looked at her, then at the assistant. "Who is it?" "Brandon Hayes, sir." Grace closed her eyes. She knew what was coming. Brandon wasn't there just to say hello. He was there to destroy. Again, Jacob took her hand. "Let's finish this, together." They walked into the conference room. The investors were seated, serious. Brandon stood holding an envelope. "Ah, glad you're here," he said with a poisonous smile. "I was just explaining to the gentleman about the integrity of Crawford Enterprises' team." Jacob crossed his arms. "Get to the point." Brandon opened the envelope and pulled out a document. He laid it on the table. "This is a contract signed by Grace Sinclair 3 years ago. A contract that ties her directly to a fund diversion scheme, corporate fraud, and she was never cleared of it." The investors looked at Grace, shocked. Jacob picked up the document, scanned it quickly, then looked at Brandon. "This proves nothing. It proves she can't be trusted, and that your company is hiring criminals." Grace felt tears sting her eyes, but they weren't going to fall. Not this time. Jacob tossed the paper back on the table. "Meeting's over. Everyone out. Now." The investors hesitated, but did as they were told. Brandon was the last to leave, throwing a triumphant look at Grace. When the door closed, Jacob turned to her, and Grace didn't know if she was about to be fired or saved. Jacob stared at her for a few seconds that felt like hours. The silence in the room was heavy, almost suffocating. She braced for the worst. "Do you have proof that you didn't do this?" he asked, voice steady. Grace swallowed hard. I do, but it's hidden. I kept everything when I ran. Emails, records, even recordings. Brandon faked the data. I found out too late. Jacob crossed his arms. Then why didn't he use it before? Because I was scared. He has connections. Powerful people. I thought if I disappeared, he'd leave me alone. She looked down. I was wrong. Jacob took a deep breath and grabbed his phone. Let's fix this. Now. But before he could dial, the door opened. It was Amanda, the company's press officer, looking pale. Mr. Crawford, we have a problem. The press knows. They're publishing stories about the consultant involved in fraud. Jacob clenched his fists. How did they find out so fast? Someone leaked it, and they're asking for the company's response. Grace felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Everything was falling apart again. Jacob looked at her, then at Amanda. Tell the press we're not commenting, yet. I need time. Amanda left. Jacob turned to Grace. You have 24 hours to bring me that proof. If it's solid, I'll back you up. If it's not, I'll have to let you go. Grace felt her chest tighten, but she nodded. I'll get it, today. She ran out, took a cab to the storage unit where she kept her old things in a forgotten part of Chicago. She opened the dusty locker, searched through old boxes, until she found a brown envelope with everything she needed. Documents, printed emails, a flash drive with recordings. Everything. She returned to the company 2 hours later, breathless, with the envelope in hand. Jacob was in his office, alone, staring out the window. I brought it, she said, placing the envelope on the desk. Jacob opened it, started reading, and the more he read, the more his expression changed. Surprise, anger, outrage. He faked everything, Jacob muttered. Even the signatures. Grace felt the tears coming. She didn't want to cry. She never cried, but she couldn't hold them back. The tears fell silent as she tried to stay composed. I didn't do anything wrong, she said, voice trembling. I swear, I just wanted to work, to help, and he ruined everything. Jacob stood, walked over to her, and for the first time since they met, gently touched her shoulder. I believe you. Grace looked up, surprised. You do? I do. And we're going to take him down. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, trying to smile. How? Jacob picked up his phone. I'm calling my lawyer. We'll build a full case, show everything Brandon did, and when we're done, he'll regret coming back. Grace took a deep breath. For the first time in days, she felt a thread of hope. In the days that followed, Grace and Jacob worked side by side. They spent hours reviewing documents, organizing evidence, building a perfect timeline. And in the middle of all that, something began to shift between them. There were small moments, a long glance when Grace explained a chart, a slight smile from Jacob when she made a dry joke about spreadsheets, comfortable silences that said more than any words. One night, it was past 10. They were alone in the office. Grace closed the last file and sighed. I think we're done. Jacob leaned back in his chair. You're amazing. You know that? Grace laughed, grabbing her purse. Amazing? I'm just good with numbers. No, you're resilient, smart, and funny when you want to be. She stopped, looked at him, and felt her heart race. Jacob? Grace, Before he could finish, his phone rang. It was the lawyer. Jacob answered, annoyed. Grace used the chance to leave before the conversation went too far. The next day they were in the elevator, coming back from a meeting. They were alone. The elevator moved slowly. Jacob stared at the button panel. Grace stared at the floor. But both could feel the tension in the air. Jacob turned to her. Grace, I need to tell you something. She looked up. What? He stepped closer. The space between them shrank. Grace felt his breath near her face. Her heart pounded so loud, she was sure he could hear it. Jacob leaned in slowly. Grace closed her eyes. And then, the elevator doors opened. Mr. Crawford, shouted an assistant, rushing in with a stack of papers. I need your signature. It's urgent. Jacob stepped back, irritated. Grace let out the breath she'd been holding. The assistant didn't notice anything. He kept talking non-stop about contracts and deadlines. Grace left the elevator on the first floor she saw without looking back. Later, alone at her desk, she pressed her forehead into her hands. What was happening? She couldn't fall in love. Not now. Not with him. It was dangerous. It was complicated. It was inevitable. Jacob felt it too. But he fought against it. He couldn't allow himself to be weak. He had a company to run, a reputation to protect. He couldn't look vulnerable. But when he looked at Grace, none of that seemed to matter. 3 days later, the file was ready. Jacob scheduled a meeting with the investors to present the evidence of Grace's innocence. Everything was planned. Everything was set. But that same morning, before the meeting, Amanda ran into the office, her face red with worry. "Mr. Crawford, Brandon Hayes has filed a lawsuit against Crawford Enterprises." Jacob jumped to his feet. "What?" "He's accusing the company of fraudulent hiring and involvement in money laundering, and Grace's name is listed as the main defendant." Grace felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at Jacob, panicked. He found out. He found out about our plan." Jacob grabbed the document Amanda had brought. He read quickly, his eyes narrowing with every line. "He moved first. This lawsuit is a smokescreen. He wants to force us into a settlement before we can expose the evidence." Grace sat down, her legs weak. "What are we going to do?" Jacob looked at her. There was determination in his eyes. "We're going to war, for real this time." He picked up the phone and called the lawyer. "I want you to prepare a full defense, and I want you to file a countersuit. Fraud, document forgery, extortion, everything we've got on Brandon Hayes." Grace listened, her heart racing. This was getting bigger than she had imagined. Brandon wasn't just a vengeful ex-partner. He was dangerous, and he was willing to destroy everything in his path. Jacob hung up the phone and looked at her. "Are you with me?" Grace took a deep breath. She thought of everything she had lost, everything she had rebuilt, and she looked at Jacob, the man who had believed in her when no one else did. "I am," she said firmly, "until the end." Jacob smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Then let's finish this." But as they prepared for the confrontation, neither of them knew that Brandon was just getting started. And the worst was yet to come. Jacob hired the best lawyers in Chicago, 3 of them. Specialists in corporate defense, financial fraud, and defamation, as expensive as a yacht and as sharp as scalpels. At the first meeting, they arrived with leather folders, flawless suits, and confident smiles. The team leader, a gray-haired man named Richard, opened the folder and began explaining the strategy. "We're going to build a triple defense. First, we prove that Miss Sinclair had no access to the systems at the time of the fraud. Second, we show that Brandon Hayes forged documents. Third, we discredit any witness he brings forward." Grace listened, sitting next to Jacob. When Richard finished, she cleared her throat. "May I ask a question?" "Of course, Miss Sinclair. How many times have you defended someone wrongly accused of fraud?" Richard hesitated. "A few. And how many times did you win?" "Most of them." Grace smiled. "Most isn't 100%. So with all due respect, I'm going to represent myself." Silence filled the room. Jacob turned to her, surprised. "Grace, you can't do this." "Yes, I can. I studied law before specializing in data analysis. I never finished, but I learned enough. And no one knows this case better than I do." Richard chuckled, condescending. "Miss, with all due respect, a courtroom isn't a place for amateurs." Grace tilted her head. "And waitresses don't usually save billion-dollar meetings either. Yet here we are." Jacob tried not to smile. Richard frowned. "Mr. Crawford, this is madness." Jacob looked at Grace. There was determination in her eyes, the same determination he'd seen when she fixed the system, the same that had kept her going for 3 years alone. "She's going to represent herself," Jacob said firmly, "but you'll stay on as consultants, help from behind the scenes." Richard sighed, defeated. "As you wish." The trial day came 2 weeks later. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, onlookers, investors, everyone wanted to see the outcome of the story that had already become news. Grace walked in wearing a simple gray suit, her hair tied back, no heavy makeup. She looked calm, but inside, her heart was beating like a war drum. Brandon was on the other side, surrounded by 3 lawyers, a confident smile on his face. When their eyes met, he waved. Grace didn't respond. The judge walked in. Everyone stood. The trial began. Brandon's lawyer was the first to speak. He presented the case dramatically, painting Grace as a skilled criminal who had fooled everyone. He showed the old contract, the manipulated numbers, everything linking Grace to the scheme. When he finished, it was Grace's turn. She stood up, walked to the center of the courtroom, and began. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Grace Sinclair, and I did not commit any fraud." Her voice was steady, clear, no hesitation. The opposing lawyer presented documents, but documents can be forged, and they were. "I'll prove it." She handed a sheet to the judge. "This is the access log from the company's system at the time of the alleged fraud. As you can see, I was on vacation, out of the country, in London. I have passport stamps, tickets, even photos. Brandon's lawyer stood up. Objection. She could have accessed the system remotely. Grace smiled. I could have, if my login was active. But as you can see in this record, my access was temporarily blocked for security maintenance. I had no way to enter the system. Even if I wanted to, there were murmurs in the room. The judge examined the documents. Grace continued. On top of that, the fraudulent transfers happened at 3 in the morning, Chicago time. I was in London. That's a 6-hour difference. It was 9 in the morning there. I was at a museum. I have receipts. She handed over more papers. Brandon's lawyer started sweating. Grace turned to Brandon. Mr. Hayes claims I involved him in the scheme, but the truth is the opposite. He manipulated data, forged my signature, and when I found out, he threatened me. Brandon stood up, furious. That's a lie. The judge banged the gavel. Order. Grace remained calm. I have proof. Recorded conversations, emails, everything showing that he knew about the scheme and tried to pin it on me. She gave a signal. Richard, waiting backstage, brought a laptop. Grace connected it to the projector. And then, to everyone's shock, a video appeared. It was security camera footage dated 3 years earlier. It showed Brandon alone in an office, working on files at a computer, changing numbers, forging digital signatures. The room burst into whispers. Brandon turned pale. His lawyer tried to speak but had no argument. The judge watched the entire video, then looked at Brandon. Mr. Hayes, do you have anything to say? Brandon tried to speak, but no words came out. His lawyer requested a recess. The judge denied it. 2 hours later, the verdict came. Grace Clare, acquitted. Guilty of fraud, document forgery, and defamation. The news spread like wildfire. In less than an hour, it was all over the papers. Genius waitress brings down conman in courtroom. Grace left the courthouse surrounded by reporters, flashes, microphones, questions everywhere. Jacob appeared out of nowhere, cleared a path, and took her to the car. Once they finally got away, Grace let out a breath she had been holding. Then she laughed. A long, freeing laugh, full of relief. I did it, she said, laughing. I actually did it. Jacob smiled. You were amazing. Amazing? I was terrified. Didn't seem like it. She looked at him. Thank you for believing in me. Jacob held her hand. I'll always believe in you. They stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then Jacob asked, Want to have dinner? Off the record, Grace smiled. I thought you'd never ask. They went to a small restaurant, far from the city noise. A quiet place with dim lights and soft music. They talked for hours, about everything, about life, dreams, and failures. Jacob shared how he lost his mother young and had to take over the company too soon. Grace talked about the father she never met and the mother who died when she was 17. I guess that's why I've always tried to prove myself, Grace said. I wanted to show I was worth something. You're worth a lot, Jacob replied, looking into her eyes. Grace felt her heart race. Jacob leaned in. So did she. And finally, with no elevators, no interruptions, no fear, they kissed. It was a slow, gentle kiss, full of everything they couldn't put into words. When they pulled back, they were smiling like two teenagers. About time, Grace joked. Jacob laughed. Sorry for the delay. They stayed there until the restaurant closed. Then Jacob drove her home, or rather to the temporary apartment he had rented for her after the other one was broken into. When they reached the front of the building, Grace turned to him. Want to come up? Jacob hesitated, then smiled. I do. But before they could get out of the car, Jacob's phone rang. It was Amanda, the press officer. Mr. Crawford, we need to talk, now. I'm busy. It's urgent. The company is under investigation. Jacob froze. What do you mean? The IRS has opened an investigation into a financial scandal. They're saying there's been embezzlement, and Grace's name came up, linked to a suspicious number in recent transactions. Jacob's expression changed. Grace saw it. She knew. Something had gone wrong. What is it? She asked. Jacob hung up the phone and looked at her, serious. Brandon wasn't working alone, and now they're coming after you again. Grace felt her stomach twist. It had all been too good to be true. The win in court, the dinner, the kiss. But the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Grace stayed up all night, sitting on the couch in the temporary apartment, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so fast. An hour ago, she was kissing Jacob. Now, she was back in the nightmare. The next morning, Jacob showed up early. He brought coffee and a serious look on his face. "I spent the whole night talking to my lawyers. They're looking into where this accusation came from." Grace took the coffee but didn't drink it. "Jacob, maybe I should leave the company, before this hurts you even more." "Don't even think about it. You don't get it. I'm a magnet for trouble. I always have been. Wherever I go, chaos follows." Jacob took her hand. "Then we'll face the chaos together." Grace wanted to believe that. But fear was louder. That afternoon, Jacob was called to an emergency board meeting. When he entered the conference room, he realized it wasn't just any meeting. There were lawyers, outside auditors, and someone he hadn't seen in months. Evelyn Carter. She was sitting at the head of the table, flawless as always. Perfectly styled blonde hair, a beige suit, cold smile. Jacob's ex-fiancée. Minority partner at Crawford Enterprises, and one of the most dangerous people he knew. "Jacob," she said with that sweet voice that always carried poison. "So glad you could join us." Jacob sat down tense. "What are you doing here, Evelyn?" "I'm a partner. I have a right to be part of important meetings, and this one is very important." The CFO, a man named Gerald with glasses, cleared his throat. "Mr. Crawford, we've received troubling information about suspicious transactions involving the company, and your consultant's name, Grace Sinclair, appears on several of them." Jacob crossed his arms. "Grace doesn't have access to company accounts. She's a strategy consultant. She doesn't handle finances." Evelyn tilted her head. "But she did, 3 years ago, at the previous company, and her record isn't exactly clean, is it?" Jacob looked at her coldly. "She was cleared. In court, yesterday." "From the old case, yes, but these new accusations are concerning." Gerald slid a folder across the table. Jacob opened it. Inside were documents showing bank transfers, numbers that didn't add up, and Grace's name on several invoices. "This is ridiculous," Jacob said. "Someone's trying to frame her again, or she's trying to use your company to launder money," Evelyn replied with a gentle smile. Jacob slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. Grace didn't do any of this." "Then prove it." A heavy silence fell over the room. Evelyn stood, walked toward Jacob, and leaned in close. "Darling, I know you care about her, but you're letting your feelings cloud your judgment. The company is at risk, the investors are nervous, and as long as she's here, things will only get worse." Jacob clenched his fists. "What do you want?" "For her to step away, temporarily, until the investigation is over." "And if I say no," Evelyn smiled, "then I'll call for a board vote. And you know I have enough votes." Jacob knew. Evelyn had built her alliances over the years. She walked out of the room, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and veiled threats. Later, Jacob went to Grace's desk. She was organizing reports, trying to stay busy. "I need to tell you something," he said, voice heavy. Grace looked at him, and she knew, even before he spoke. "They're pushing me out, aren't they?" Jacob nodded. "It's temporary, just until we clear this up." Grace gave a sad smile. "It's okay. I expected it." "Grace, no, really, it's okay. I'll be fine." But she wasn't fine, and Jacob knew it. That same afternoon, Evelyn arranged a private meeting with Grace. They met at an upscale cafe, far from the office. Evelyn ordered an espresso. Grace asked for water. "I'll be direct," Evelyn said, stirring her sugar. "I want you to step away from Jacob and the company, permanently." Grace laughed. "You don't have that kind of power." "Don't I? I can offer money. A lot. Enough for you to start over. Somewhere far from here. Far from him." Grace leaned in. "I'm not for sale," Evelyn smiled. But it was a dangerous smile. "Everyone's for sale, sweetheart. It's just a matter of price." "Then you don't have enough money." Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "You're making a mistake." "Wouldn't be the first." Grace stood up and walked out, leaving Evelyn alone. But she knew she had just made a powerful enemy. With her temporary leave, Grace went back to Maison Bleu. The manager, a kind man named Tom, welcomed her with open arms. "Grace, good to see you. Need a job?" "I need normal," Tom laughed. "Then you came to the right place." Grace put on the white uniform again, served plates, smiled at customers. It felt strange. After everything she'd been through, going back there felt like a step backward. But it also felt safe. In the kitchen, she ran into Deanne, the cook who had spoken to Jacob weeks earlier. "So, back to the real world?" Diane joked as she chopped onions. Grace laughed. "Looks like it. And the billionaire boss? It's complicated. Always is." They both laughed, and Grace realized she missed this, the simplicity. Conversations without hidden agendas. But at night, alone in her apartment, she thought of Jacob. Was he okay? Could he handle the pressure? Jacob, on the other hand, was struggling. Evelyn was skillfully manipulating the board, planting doubt, creating division. Investors started to question his decisions, and he missed Grace. The way she looked at problems from a different angle, her smile when she solved something impossible. A week later, Evelyn made her final move. She leaked a complete file to the press. Forged documents, well-made images showing that Grace and Jacob had allegedly manipulated numbers in past deals to save failing contracts. The news blew up. CEO and consultant accused of corporate fraud. Jacob Crawford under investigation for data manipulation. Former waitress helped boss deceive investors. Jacob saw the headline on his phone during a meeting. His blood boiled. Grace saw it on the restaurant TV. Her world collapsed. Reporters swarmed Crawford Enterprises. They swarmed Maison Bleu. They swarmed their lives. And Evelyn watched it all from afar, with a victorious smile. That night, Jacob tried calling Grace. She didn't answer. Not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know what to say. Grace looked at the screen as his name flashed. She wanted to pick up. She wanted to hear his voice. But she was scared. Scared that he'd finally realize she only brought him trouble. She turned off the phone, lay on the bed, and for the first time in a long while, cried herself to sleep. The next morning, Grace woke up to her phone buzzing non-stop. Messages from unknown numbers, social media comments, insults, threats, people she had never met saying terrible things about her. Criminal. Gold digger. You ruined an honest man's life. Grace turned off her phone, but she couldn't turn off the TV in time. There she was on the screen, next to Jacob, with the headline, Duo Accused of Multi-Million-Dollar Fraud. She sat on the floor, hugged her knees, and tried to breathe. But it felt like no air was getting into her lungs. Meanwhile, at Crawford Enterprises, Jacob was facing the worst day of his career. Company stock dropped 23% in 2 hours. Investors were calling, demanding answers. The board called for an emergency meeting. Evelyn was there, of course, sitting with that quiet smile Jacob knew all too well. Jacob, said Gerald, the CFO. We need a statement. Now. We're investigating, Jacob said tensely. That's not enough. The press wants answers. The investors want answers. And so do we. Evelyn leaned forward. Maybe it's best if you step aside for now, Jacob. At least until this is all resolved. Jacob looked at her with controlled anger. I'm not stepping aside. Then the board will vote to remove you. Jacob knew she was right. He knew the votes were already bought. He knew he was losing control, so he made a decision. I take the blame. The room went silent. What? Gerald asked. I take responsibility. Grace Sinclair had nothing to do with this. I manipulated the data. I did everything. She's innocent. Evelyn's eyes widened, surprised. She hadn't seen that coming. Jacob, you can't. It's done. I'll make a public statement today. He got up and left before anyone could stop him. 3 hours later, Jacob stood in front of the cameras at an impromptu press conference. Dozens of reporters, flashing cameras, microphones. He read a short, direct statement. I, Jacob Crawford, take full responsibility for the irregularities found during the investigation. Grace Sinclair was not involved in any financial decisions made by the company. The blame is entirely mine. The room erupted with questions. But Jacob didn't answer a single one. He just walked away. Grace watched everything on the restaurant's TV. She was frozen. What had he done? Why did he do that? Diane, standing next to her, whispered, That man loves you, girl. Grace didn't answer. She just grabbed her purse and ran out. 15 minutes later, she burst into Jacob's office without knocking. He was sitting there, looking out the window with a tired expression. What did you do? Grace shouted. Jacob turned, surprised. Grace, don't you grace me. You just lied to the whole world. You took the blame for something you didn't do. I know what I did. Why? Why would you do that? Jacob stood up and walked toward her. Because you didn't deserve to go through that again. Grace was furious, but also moved and confused. You're an idiot, a complete idiot. Now you're going to lose everything, the company, your reputation, everything. I don't care. What do you mean you don't care? Because you matter more. Grace stopped, looked at him, and felt the tears coming. You can't do this for me. I already did. She took a step closer, angry. Do you think I'm weak? That I need a hero to save me? No. I know you're strong, but I don't want you to face this alone. I've always faced things alone, but you don't have to anymore." They stood face to face, breathing hard, eyes locked. Then, without thinking, Grace grabbed his collar and kissed him. It was a fierce kiss, full of anger, fear, and love all at once. When they pulled apart, she said, her voice shaking, "I love you too, you idiot. And that's why I'm going to fix this mess." Jacob cupped her face in his hands. "How?" "By investigating, finding proof, exposing who's really behind this." "Exactly." Grace didn't run away this time. She called the only investigative journalist she knew, a man named Daniel Carter, known for digging up truths no one wanted to face. They met at a quiet cafe. Grace showed him everything she had: documents, emails, recordings. Daniel studied it all with a sharp eye. "This is gold," he said. "But I need more. I need something that links Evelyn directly to the fraud." Grace thought. Then she remembered. The flash drive Brandon left in the envelope. She had never fully opened it. Maybe something was there. She went home, grabbed the flash drive, and plugged it into her laptop, and there it was. Emails between Brandon and Evelyn. Discussions on how to frame Grace, detailed plans, bank transfers. Evelyn had been behind everything from the start. Grace sent it all to Daniel. He put together a full report, and then, somehow, pulled off the impossible. He got Evelyn invited to a live TV show to clear her name about the scandal. Evelyn accepted, confident. She thought she had it all under control. But when the show began, Daniel appeared as a surprise co-host, and he brought everything out, live, for millions of viewers. He showed the emails, the transfers, the chats with Brandon, everything. Evelyn tried to deny it, tried to walk out, but the cameras stayed on, and the whole world saw it. Within 24 hours, the truth was everywhere. Evelyn Carter, the real culprit. Partner manipulates investigation to destroy rival. Grace Sinclair cleared once again. Grace's name was restored. Evelyn was fired by the board, sued, and banned from the corporate world. Jacob made another public statement, taking back his earlier confession and explaining the truth. Crawford Enterprises stock went back up. A week later, the board called Grace in for a meeting. She went, nervous. Jacob was there too. Gerald, the CFO, spoke first. "Miss Sinclair, after everything that happened, we recognize your value and your innocence. We'd like you to come back, officially." Grace blinked, surprised. "Come back?" "Yes, but not as a temporary consultant. We want to offer you a leadership role, director of strategic analysis. You'd lead a whole team." Grace felt her heart race. "Really?" "Absolutely. But there's one condition." Grace felt her stomach tighten. "What is it?" Gerald exchanged an uneasy look with the other board members. "You'll need to leave your old life behind, full commitment. And," he hesitated, "you'll have to step away from Mr. Crawford. Personally, you can't have any kind of relationship beyond professional." Grace looked at Jacob. He was pale. He knew this was coming, but it still hurt. "Are you serious?" Grace asked. "The company can't afford another scandal. Relationships between top executives create conflicts of interest. It's company policy." Grace took a deep breath, looked at Jacob, then at the board, and realized she was, once again, being forced to choose between her career and her happiness. Grace took a deep breath. She looked at the serious faces around the table. Then she looked at Jacob. He was tense, waiting for her answer, and then she spoke. "No." Gerald blinked, confused. "What do you mean, no?" "Thank you for the offer, really, but I'm not accepting it." "Miss Sinclair, maybe you didn't understand. We're offering you a director-level position. Excellent salary, decision-making power, everything you could want." Grace smiled, but it was a tired smile. "I understood perfectly. But I'm tired of corporate games, tired of people deciding my life, tired of having to choose between what I want and what you think is best." She stood up. "I'm going back to the restaurant. At least there, no one tells me who I can or can't be with." And she left the room without looking back. Jacob stood there, frozen. He wanted to run after her, wanted to shout that she was right, but he couldn't move. Gerald looked at him. "Mr. Crawford, maybe it's best to let her go. It's what's best for the company." Jacob looked at him coldly. The company isn't everything. But he still didn't go after her. In the days that followed, Grace went back to Maison Bleu full-time. She put on the white uniform, picked up the tray, and returned to serving dishes. And for the first time in months, she felt light. Diane greeted her with a hug. "Welcome back, sweetheart. So you gave up on the corporate world?" "I didn't give up. I just chose peace over power." "Smart choice." Grace smiled and realized she was happy, truly happy. She didn't have an important title. She didn't have a six-figure salary, but she had peace. She had friends. She had a life that made sense. At night, she served tables, chatted with customers, laughed with coworkers, and when she got home, she slept without nightmares. Meanwhile, Jacob was falling apart. The company was fine. Stock prices went up. Investors regained confidence. Everything was working perfectly. But he couldn't focus. He looked at the chair where Grace used to sit and saw only emptiness. He heard a joke in the hallway and thought about how she would laugh. He saw a complex problem and thought about how she would solve it in minutes. His assistant, an efficient woman named Helen, noticed. "Mr. Crawford, can I be honest with you?" "Of course." "You look like a zombie. Since Miss Sinclair left, you haven't been yourself." Jacob sighed. "It's that obvious?" "To anyone who knows you, yes." Jacob stayed silent. Helen continued, "If you care about her, go after her. Life's too short to get stuck in company rules." Jacob looked at her, surprised. "You don't think it's too complicated?" "Everything's complicated, but some things are worth it." That night, Jacob made a decision. 3 days later, it was a regular Thursday at Maison Bleau. Grace was serving a table of 4 when she saw, through the window, a man in a suit walking in. Jacob, her heart skipped a beat. He looked impeccable as always, but there was something different in his eyes, a determination she hadn't seen in weeks. Jacob sat at a table near the window. Grace walked over, trying to stay composed. "Good evening, what can I get you?" Jacob looked at her. "Coffee. Black. No sugar." Grace wrote it down, her hand shaking slightly. "Just that, for now." She went to the kitchen, made the coffee, and came back. She placed the cup on the table. Jacob took a sip. "Is it good?" "Perfect, as always." They were quiet. Grace started to walk away, but Jacob spoke. "Sit with me, please." Grace hesitated, looked around. There weren't many customers. Tom, the manager, nodded, giving her permission. She sat down. "What are you doing here, Jacob? Having coffee?" "You don't come here just for coffee." Jacob smiled. "True, I came because I miss you." Grace felt her chest tighten. "Jacob." "I know. We drifted apart. It was the right decision. Or at least, that's what I thought. But my life lost its color without you." Grace looked at her hands. "So did mine. But I can't come back. Not on their terms." "I know, and I'm not asking you to." Grace looked up, confused. "Then what do you want?" Jacob leaned forward. "I still want the quick-thinking woman, even if she's just serving me coffee." Grace laughed. It was a quiet, emotional laugh. "You're impossible." "I am, but I'm yours." Grace felt the tears coming, but this time they were good tears. "And the company?" "The rules." "To hell with the rules." Grace's eyes widened. "Jacob Crawford, you just cursed. This is serious." He laughed. "I'm learning to live a little." They stayed there, talking until the restaurant closed. They talked about everything, about fear, about the future, about what really mattered. When Grace went to lock the door, Jacob waited outside. "Can I walk you home?" "You can." They walked together. Chicago was cold, but Grace didn't feel it. Jacob held her hand, and just like that, everything felt right again. The next day, Jacob was in his office, sorting through some old documents that needed to be filed away. He opened the drawer of Grace's old desk, looking for a report, and found a notebook. It was old, the cover worn. Jacob opened it carefully. Inside were pages and pages of notes, sketches, plans, ideas for a business of her own. A restaurant. Not just any restaurant. A place that combined fine dining with data analysis to optimize the customer experience. Personalized menus based on preferences. A smart reservation system. Everything thought out down to the smallest detail. And it was all there. The entire project. Designed by Grace's brilliant mind. Jacob read every page, and with each line, a plan started forming in his head. She didn't want to go back to the company, didn't want to be a director. She wanted something of her own, something that made sense to her, and he was going to give that to her. Jacob took the notebook, tucked it under his arm, and walked out of the office with determined steps. Helen saw him pass by. "Mr. Crawford, you have a meeting in 10 minutes. Cancel it." "I have something more important to do." Helen smiled, because she knew exactly what he was going to do. Jacob got in the car and drove straight to Maison Bleau, parked out front, took the notebook, and walked in. Grace was wiping down tables. When she saw him, she stopped. "Jacob, again?" He walked over to her and placed the notebook on the table. "I found this, in your old desk." Grace looked at it. recognized it immediately. She turned pale. You read it? I did. All of it. Grace swallowed hard. It was just a silly dream. Nothing serious. Jacob took her hands. What if I helped you make it real? Grace paused, looked at him, puzzled. What do you mean? Jacob smiled, and Grace knew something big was about to happen. She looked at Jacob, then at the notebook, then back at him. Are you serious? Absolutely. I'll turn your ideas into a business plan. I'll find the perfect location. I'll invest. But you'll run everything. Grace felt her heart race. Jacob, this is crazy. Restaurants are risky. Most of them close in the first year. Most don't have you in charge. She laughed, a bit nervous. You have a lot of faith in me. I do. And you should too. Grace looked around Maison Bleu, the place that welcomed her when she had nothing else. But that never really belonged to her. Can I think about it? Of course. Just don't take too long. I have a good feeling about this. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She kept flipping through the notebook, remembering every idea she had written years ago. A restaurant that used data to create unique experiences, where the food was excellent, but attention to detail made all the difference. The next morning, she called Jacob. All right, let's do it. She could almost hear him smile on the other end. Great, I'll see you in an hour. I have something to show you. Jacob took her to a neighborhood being revitalized in downtown Chicago. He stopped in front of an old building with large windows and exposed brick. What do you think? Grace got out of the car, looking at the building. About what? Your restaurant. Her eyes widened. You already bought it? Long-term lease. With a purchase option. Come on, let me show you inside. The space was perfect. High ceilings, natural light, a spacious kitchen that only needed modern equipment. Grace walked slowly, touching the walls, imagining how everything would look. It's perfect, she whispered. I know, she turned to him. Jacob, this is going to cost a lot. I don't have money to invest. I do, and I want to be your partner. But let me be clear. You'll be in charge. I'm just the investor and the helper, and maybe the dishwasher. Grace laughed. You? Washing dishes? Why not? I need to learn humility. In the following days, they worked together on the plan. Grace designed the menu, thought about the decor, created the smart reservation system. Jacob took care of the contracts, permits, and hiring suppliers. And they brought in help. Diane, the cook from Maison Bleu, agreed to be the head chef. Tom, the manager, came on as a consultant. Other restaurant colleagues joined in too. It was a small team, but a united one. A month later, the restaurant was ready. Exposed brick walls, dark wooden tables, soft lights hanging from the ceiling. In the center, an open kitchen where customers could watch the meals being prepared. And at the entrance, an elegant sign with the name Grace had chosen. Insight. The grand opening was set for a Friday night. Grace was nervous. She walked back and forth, checking every detail. Relax, Jacob said, holding her shoulders. Everything's going to be fine. What if no one shows up? They will. Trust me. And they did. Journalists, influencers, even a few local celebrities who had heard Grace's story and wanted to show support. The restaurant filled up in minutes. Grace moved through the tables, chatting with customers, explaining the concept, smiling even though her nerves were on edge. Jacob, meanwhile, was in the kitchen. Diane had insisted he learn at least the basics of cooking. You're a partner. You need to know what goes on back here, she said, handing him a frying pan. What do I do with this? Fry some eggs. Simple. Jacob looked at the eggs like they were explosives. How many? 3. And try not to burn them. He cracked the first egg. The shell went in with it. Diane rolled her eyes. Take the shell out, Jacob. I'm trying. He cracked the second one. This time, only the yolk made it into the pan. The white ran all over the counter. How do you make this look so easy? Diane laughed. Practice and talent. You have neither. Finally, on the third egg, he got it right. But when he went to flip it, the yolk broke. Perfect, Diane teased. You just made scrambled eggs by accident. Grace walked into the kitchen just then and saw Jacob covered in flour, staring at a broken egg in the pan. She burst out laughing. The great CEO Jacob Crawford defeated by 3 eggs. He looked at her, pretending to be offended. Show some respect. This is art. Abstract art, maybe? Everyone in the kitchen laughed, and Grace realized this was exactly what she wanted. Not perfection, but something real, joy, life. The night was a huge success. Customers raved about the food, the atmosphere, the service. A food critic said Insight was the perfect fusion of technology and tradition. When the last customer left, it was midnight. The team toasted with a glass of wine. Grace looked around, at the people who had supported her, at the place she had built, and her heart was full. Jacob came over and handed her a glass. "Congratulations, chef." "I'm not the chef. Diane is." "You're the boss. That's different, and better." Grace smiled. "Thank you, for everything." "No need to thank me. I'm just glad to be part of it." They stood there, looking at the empty restaurant that was still full of energy. "You know what's funny?" Grace said. "A few months ago I was serving coffee, hiding, scared, and now I'm here, with my own place, with you." Jacob took her hand. "You deserved this. You always did." Grace turned to him, eyes shining. "I love you, Jacob Crawford, even if you can't fry an egg." He laughed. "And I love you, Grace Sinclair, even if you're better than me at everything." They kissed right there, in the middle of the empty restaurant. No drama, no secrets, no pressure, just the two of them. And everything they had built together. In the days that followed, Insight became the talk of Chicago. Fully booked, lines out the door, glowing reviews. Grace worked from morning to night and loved every second of it. Jacob kept showing up, trying to help in the kitchen, failing miserably, but always making the team laugh. One afternoon, Diane found him trying to chop onions. "You're doing it wrong. There's a right way to cut onions?" "There is, and that's not it." Jacob sighed. "Maybe I'm better at eating than cooking." "Finally, you admit it." Grace walked by at that moment, took the knife from his hand, and chopped the onion in seconds, smooth and fast. "Like this. See?" Jacob stared at her, impressed. "You're scary good at this." "I know. Now get out of the kitchen before you cut off a finger." He left, laughing, but not before giving her a quick kiss. Grace blushed, but smiled. That night, after closing the restaurant, they walked through the streets of Chicago. The city lights were glowing, the air was cold, but they didn't mind. "Are you happy?" Jacob asked. Grace looked at him. "Very. For the first time in years, I'm really happy." "Me too." They walked in silence for a few minutes. Then Grace said, "You know, there's something I never told you." "What?" "When we first met, I thought you were arrogant, annoying, impossible." Jacob laughed. "And now?" "Now I think you're arrogant, annoying, impossible, and the best thing that's ever happened to me." He stopped, pulled her close, and kissed her slowly like they had all the time in the world. And maybe they did. Because finally, after all the chaos, all the pain, all the twists and turns, they had peace. They had each other. And they had a future they had built together. Grace didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. Because no matter what happened, she knew she wouldn't face it alone. Jacob spent 3 weeks planning the perfect proposal. He had everything written in a notebook hidden in his office. A reservation at the best Italian restaurant in Chicago, white flowers, a violinist, even the exact moment he would get down on one knee. But when the day came, everything started to fall apart. First, the weather forecast. "Sunny all day," they said. Jacob checked 3 times. He trusted it. Put on his best suit, grabbed the ring that cost 3 months' salary, and went to pick up Grace at Insight. She came out wearing a simple light green dress, hair down, a smile on her face. "Where are we going?" "Surprise." "I love surprises. As long as they don't involve courtrooms or investigations." Jacob laughed. "I promise, no drama today." 5 minutes after they left, it started to rain. Not just a drizzle, a downpour, the kind that turns streets into rivers within minutes. Jacob looked up at the sky, in disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me," Grace laughed. "Looks like nature's not on your side. Or maybe it just loves testing my patience." They arrived at the restaurant completely soaked. Jacob opened the door. It was dark, empty. A note was taped up, closed due to emergency. "Sorry for the inconvenience." Jacob stood there, staring at the sign like it was written in another language. No. I called yesterday. I confirmed everything." Grace touched his arm. "It's okay, we can go somewhere else. But I planned everything here. The flowers, the musician, the table by the window." "Jacob, it's okay. Let's improvise." He took a deep breath. "Okay. Improvise." He could do that. They walked through the rain looking for another restaurant, but it was Friday night. Everything was full. They tried 4 places. None had tables available. Jacob was starting to panic. Grace noticed, "Hey, look at me." He looked. "It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be the two of us." Jacob smiled, a little embarrassed. You always know what to say. It's a gift. They decided to walk back. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still soaked. Jacob was nervous, the ring heavy in his pocket, the speech he'd memorized slipping from his mind. They passed by a small plaza with wooden benches and a fountain in the center. Jacob stopped. "Grace, wait." She turned around. "What?" Jacob tried to take a step forward and tripped on a loose stone in the sidewalk. Fell to his knees. Not on purpose. Just fell. "Ouch," he shouted, grabbing his knee. Grace rushed to him. "Are you okay?" Jacob looked up. She was standing there, wet, worried, beautiful. And he realized this was the moment. Not perfect, but real. He stayed on his knees, pulled the ring from his pocket, and opened the little box. Grace's eyes widened. "Jacob, Grace Sinclair. I've been planning this moment for weeks." It was supposed to be at a fancy restaurant with flowers, music, everything perfect. But nothing worked out. It rained. The restaurant closed. I tripped. And you know what? It's perfect just like this. Grace started laughing and crying at the same time. "Because with you, even chaos makes sense. You taught me that life doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be real. And I want to live that truth with you, forever." He held up the ring. "Will you marry me?" Grace looked at him, kneeling in the middle of the street, soaking wet, scraped knee, holding a beautiful ring, and said the only thing that made sense. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." Jacob slipped the ring on her finger, stood up, pulled her into a long kiss under the streetlight. A few people passing by clapped. Well, I could. When they pulled apart, Grace looked at it. It was perfect. Delicate, elegant, with a small but bright diamond. "It's beautiful. You deserved a bigger one, but I thought you'd prefer something understated. It's perfect, just like you." "Even when you trip," Jacob laughed. "Come on, let's go home. I need ice for this knee." They went to Jacob's apartment, a spacious modern place with big windows overlooking the city. Grace had never been there before. "Wow, this place is huge, too big for just one person, but now it'll be ours." Grace smiled. "Ours." She liked the sound of that. Jacob grabbed some ice in the kitchen and placed it on his knee. Grace sat next to him on the couch. "You really planned everything, didn't you?" "I tried, but I guess the universe had other plans. I liked it better this way. It felt more us." Jacob held her hand. "Me too." They sat there, talking about everything, about the wedding, about the future, about what it would be like to live together, wake up together, build a life together. And as the night went on, they didn't need any more words. They just stayed there, wrapped in each other's arms, knowing they had found exactly what they were looking for. Someone to share the perfect days and the disastrous ones too. In the days that followed, they began planning the wedding. They decided it would be something small, intimate, just close friends and family. "1 month from today," said Grace, marking the calendar. "Are you sure? Don't you want more time?" "I'm sure. I've waited long enough to be happy. I don't want to wait anymore." They chose everything together. The venue, a small hall with a lake view. The flowers, simple, white and green. The menu, prepared by the Insight team, of course. Grace picked a simple dress, light lace, nothing flashy. Jacob went with a dark gray suit. Diane would be the maid of honor. Tom, the best man. "Wait," said Tom, confused. "Me? Best man? You and Diane have been our biggest supporters. It makes sense." Tom was touched. "I'd be honored." Everything was perfect. Until 1 week before the wedding, Grace got a phone call. It was Jacob's lawyer, Richard. "Miss Sinclair, we need to talk. It's urgent." Grace felt her stomach tighten. "About what?" "Evelyn Carter. She's back." Grace closed her eyes. Of course. Life couldn't just be simple. What does she want now? She still holds 5% of Crawford Enterprises shares, and she found an old clause in the company's bylaws, one that forbids marriages between partners and employees unless approved unanimously by the board. Grace frowned. "But I don't work at the company anymore." "No, but Jacob does. And you're a partner at Insight, which has a supply contract with Crawford Enterprises. Technically, that creates a conflict of interest." "That's ridiculous." "I agree. But she's using it to try to block the wedding. She's already filed a lawsuit." Grace hung up, took a deep breath, and told Jacob that night. He was furious. "She's not going to stop, is she?" "Apparently not." Jacob grabbed his phone. "I'm calling the lawyers. We'll handle this." "Jacob." Grace took his hand. "We don't have time. The wedding's in 7 days. Then we'll postpone." "No." Grace looked him straight in the eye. "We're not postponing. We're not letting her win again." But how? Grace smiled. That smile Jacob knew well, the smile of someone with a plan. Leave it to me, I'll fix this. How? You'll see. On the wedding day. Jacob hesitated. Grace, I don't want you to. Do you trust me? He looked into her eyes and saw the same determination he saw in court. The same intelligence that saved the billion-dollar meeting. The same strength that carried her through everything. I trust you. Grace spent the next few days working in silence. She called Daniel, the investigative journalist, asked for help from Richard, the lawyer. She studied every line of the company's bylaws, every word in the clause Evelyn was using, and she found the loophole. The night before the wedding, Jacob asked, "Are you going to tell me the plan?" Grace smiled. "Tomorrow, at the right time. But I promise, it'll work." He wanted to push, but he trusted her, so he just kissed her forehead and said, "You're amazing." "I know." On the morning of the wedding, Grace woke up early, put on her dress, did her hair, looked at herself in the mirror. She was ready for the wedding and for the final battle with Evelyn, because she knew Evelyn would show up, knew she'd try to ruin everything. But this time, Grace was ready. And when the moment came, she'd use all her intelligence, all her sharpness, and all her courage, because no one, absolutely no one, was going to stop her from marrying the man she loved. The venue was perfect. White and green flowers in every corner, wooden chairs lined in rows, a small platform at the front with a view of the lake through giant windows. The sunset was starting to paint the sky in orange and pink. Grace was in a side room, adjusting her dress for the third time. Diane walked in, already in her maid of honor gown, a simple champagne-colored dress. "You look beautiful," Diane said, touched. "I'm nervous." "Of course you are. It's your wedding." "It's not just that." Grace glanced at the door. "She's going to show up, I'm sure of it." "Evelyn? Yes, but I'm ready." Diane held her hands. "You always are." Across the venue, Jacob was with Tom, fixing his tie for the 5th time. "Stop messing with it," Tom said. "You'll tear it." "I can't help it, I'm nervous." "Why? You love her." "Yeah, she loves you. It's simple." "Nothing with Grace is simple. And that's exactly why it works." Tom laughed. "Well said." The guests started arriving, a small group but meaningful. Insight staff, a few of Jacob's friends, Daniel, the journalist, Richard, the lawyer, Helen, Jacob's secretary who brought tissues because she knew she'd cry. At 5 o'clock, everything was ready. The music began. The guests stood. Jacob walked to the platform, his heart pounding. And then Grace appeared. She walked slowly, alone, because she had no father to walk her down the aisle. But she didn't need one. She looked radiant. The light lace dress shimmered gently in the golden light of the sunset. Her hair fell softly over her shoulders, and her eyes, fixed on Jacob, were shining with joy. Jacob felt his eyes fill with tears. He hadn't expected that. But there he was, the tough CEO, almost crying from emotion. Grace reached the altar. Jacob held out his hand. She took it, and everything felt right. The officiant, a kind man with gray hair, began to speak. "We're gathered here today to celebrate the union of Jacob Crawford and Grace Sinclair." That was the moment the doors to the hall burst open. Evelyn walked in. Perfect beige suit, high heels, and a cold smile. Behind her, 2 men in black suits followed closely. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice echoing through the room. "But this ceremony cannot go on." Whispers exploded among the guests. Jacob clenched his fists. Grace just took a deep breath. She had expected this. Evelyn walked to the front, ignoring the angry stares. "I have here a court order," she said, holding up an envelope. "It prohibits this wedding from proceeding until the issue of conflict of interest within Crawford Enterprises is resolved." Jacob stepped forward. "You don't have that authority." "I do, and the judge agreed with me," Evelyn replied with a smile. "Sorry, Jacob, but rules are rules." Grace let go of Jacob's hand and walked up to Evelyn. They stood face to face. "You're pathetic," Grace said calmly. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "Pathetic. You heard me. You have nothing left in your life except trying to ruin other people's happiness." "I'm just protecting the company." "No. You're seeking revenge, because Jacob left you, because you lost control, because you finally realized power doesn't buy love." Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "Pretty words. But they don't change the fact that I have a court order." Grace smiled. "And I have something better." She gave a signal. Richard, the lawyer, stood up and walked forward, carrying a folder. "Miss Carter," Richard began, "the court order you're presenting is based on a clause in Crawford Enterprises bylaws. Specifically, Clause 17, Paragraph 3. Exactly. But that clause was revoked 2 months ago, in a special board meeting. Here's the signed resolution. He handed the document to Evelyn. She read it quickly. Her face turned pale. This can't be right. It is, and there's more, Grace added, stepping closer. You still own 5% of the company, but to file a court order on the company's behalf, you need at least 10%. You don't have it. Evelyn tried to respond, but Grace kept going. And one last thing. She gave another signal. A man in glasses and a gray suit stood up. This is William Patterson. He's the accountant from the company I worked at 3 years ago. He has documents that prove you paid Brandon to frame me. Bank transfers, emails, everything. William raised a thick envelope. Evelyn looked around. All eyes were on her. Angry, accusing. You can't. We can. And we just did. Grace crossed her arms. Now you have 2 choices. Leave on your own, or I call the police, and you leave in handcuffs. Evelyn stood in silence for a few seconds. Then, with clenched fists, she turned and walked out. The 2 bodyguards followed. The door slammed shut. Silence. Then someone started clapping. It was Helen, then Tom, then Diane. Within seconds, the entire room was on their feet, applauding. Grace turned to Jacob, smiling. Now, where were we? Jacob laughed, pulled her close, and kissed her. Long, intense, as everyone around them clapped. When they pulled apart, the officiant, who had watched everything with his mouth open, cleared his throat. Well, that was different. Shall we continue? Please, Grace said, laughing. The ceremony resumed, this time with no interruptions. When it was time for the vows, Jacob went first. Grace, when I met you, you were serving coffee, and I was about to lose $1 billion deal. You saved that night, and every night since. You taught me life isn't about control, it's about trust, it's about love, it's about accepting the chaos, because with you by my side, even chaos feels beautiful. Tears ran down Grace's cheeks, happy ones this time. Then it was her turn. Jacob, you are the most stubborn, persistent, and annoyingly perfect person I've ever met. Laughter from the guests. You never gave up on me, not when I ran, not when I said no, not even when everything seemed impossible. You believed, and you taught me to believe too. I love you, and I promise to spend the rest of my life reminding you of that, even when you burn the eggs. Jacob laughed, wiping his own tears. The officiant smiled. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Again. And Jacob didn't wait to be told twice. The reception began soon after. Soft music, food prepared by the Insight team, laughter and chatter all around. Grace and Jacob danced in the center of the room as the sun set completely on the horizon, bathing everything in gold. It was perfect, Grace whispered, her head on his shoulder. It was chaotic, like everything we do. Exactly. After the dance, Grace asked for everyone's attention. She gently tapped a glass with a spoon. The room fell silent. I just wanted to thank everyone who came, who supported us, who believed in us. You are our family. And she looked at Jacob. I have some news. Jacob frowned, curious. Grace smiled, a little nervous. Jacob, you're going to be a father. Silence. Jacob blinked. What? I'm pregnant, 1 month along. Jacob stood still for 3 seconds, then he started laughing and crying, and he pulled Grace into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. Really? Are you serious? Really? The room exploded with cheers, applause, hugs. Diane was crying, Tom was laughing, Helen was already on her 3rd tissue. Jacob held Grace's face. You're amazing. You said that already today. I'm going to say it every day, forever. The celebration went on late into the night. Music, dancing, funny stories being shared. Diane remembered the time Jacob tried to bake a cake and almost set the Insight kitchen on fire. Tom told the story of Grace's first time serving a table when she spilled wine on a customer but managed to turn it into a funny moment. Grace and Jacob laughed at everything and looked at each other like they were the only 2 people in the world. When the night grew late and guests began to leave, Grace and Jacob stayed behind in the empty room, looking out at the lake through the windows. Who would have thought, said Grace, resting her head on his shoulder. The waitress saved the CEO, won him over. And now she's going to have his child. Jacob kissed the top of her head. Or daughter, Grace repeated, smiling. They stood there, holding each other, while the lights of Chicago sparkled in the distance. 2 people who had found each other in the middle of chaos, who faced scandals, betrayal, threats, and still chose to stay together. Because love isn't about avoiding storms, it's about dancing in the rain. It's about falling and getting back up. It's about believing that no matter what comes, you'll face it together. And Grace and Jacob knew that better than anyone. Because their story was never perfect, but it was real. It was intense. It was theirs. And now, with a baby on the way, a business thriving, and a future full of possibility, they knew the best part of their story was just beginning. Grace looked at the ring on her finger, then at her still flat belly, then at Jacob. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of being a mom, of not knowing what to do, of messing everything up." Jacob took her hands. "You've stood up in court, exposed the bad guys, opened a restaurant from scratch. If anyone's going to be an amazing mom, it's you." Grace smiled. "And you? Are you going to be an amazing dad too?" "I'll try. But if I'm as bad at it as I am in the kitchen, we're in trouble." Grace laughed. And in that laugh, there was everything. Joy, hope, love. And when they walked out of that hall that night, hand in hand under the stars of Chicago, they knew they had found exactly what they'd been looking for. Not a fairy tale, but something better. A real story. Imperfect, messy, beautiful, and completely theirs. What did you think of Grace and Jacob's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of our stories. And check out more emotional stories by clicking right here on the final screen.